La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Welcome, benvenuti to La Lanterna podcast. This is Fabrizio with my best buddy,
Matt. What's up, Fabry? How are you?
We needed this break. We didn't announce it. I apologize for whomever was waiting for Forza Genoa. No, sorry, I'm reading the scarf that Matt just bought from the Genoa store. Which, by the way, go and check it out. It's finally out. Again, it's not the best web e-store, e-commerce store out there, but at least there's a whole bunch of Rosso Blue items from the main kit to the commemorative 130th, but also to the training stuff and Tempo Libero, accessories, t-shirts, starting to get a lot more finally at the hand in order to order. Going back to the match, we needed a break from the awful match that happened against Milan. There's right now, we're recording on Tuesday, October 17. Is it 17? I don't remember now.
It's the 17th. Yes, you're right.
17.
You're good.
And yeah, I'm just losing it. Anyways, so we just needed a break because that was such a horrible loss. So it ended 1-0 at home against AC Milan. Milan is the team that we are thinking is going to be a strong contender anyways for the Scudetto. We did play actually, surprisingly so, without Oretegui, without Badel, and without Strootman, a fairly decent match up until the 86th minute.
It's just fucking painful. I mean, like the takeaway from this match would have been so different had we gotten a result, and it seemed honestly like we deserved it for the match. I think if you talk to many Rosso Blue fan or Rossoneri fans, maybe they're happy and they really feel like they deserved the 3 points, and you know they had the more skill and they fought for it at the end and all this other bullshit. But like, I honestly think if you told them that it was going to be a draw at the end of the match, they would think that was fair. It was a fair result of what had gone on. And that's just credit. I mean, it really was a sour way to end everything. I don't think we need to get too much into exactly what happened, because I'm sure all of our listeners are Genoani across the world who are paying attention to what happened.
Just for the record, I want to say one thing. So obviously the contentious part is, and I'm not going to go into nitty gritty about it, but the contentious part is obviously the fact of a highly likelihood of a handball arm. So handball does
clear handball. Yeah.
Yeah. From basically, if you exclude the deltoid, everything else is considered handball, and by different angles. So this is the part that I get peeved about it. And I was way too active on social media because I was too angry. And essentially the excuse, because I'm going to use this word, the excuse from the referees and the VAR specifically, because they did not call the ref to the VAR monitor, so the on-field check, was essentially, we don't have enough images, even though some said, even though it does look like it, but there was not enough evidence to prove that that was actually what happened.
Bullshit.
And I think that's BS, honestly. Even throughout the match, I'm just going to mention them, but I don't even want to waste too much time about it. From the red card immediately to Gilardino at the beginning because of a penalty that was not given to Vasquez, to a foul at the beginning of the second half in the box again for a penalty not given on Thorsby, to the second yellow to Martinez, which became the red card, to the actual red card to Magnan, which needed the intervention of the ref to go to the monitor to determine that that was a straight red because he didn't realize it on the pitch. And I'm being ironic here. And to the last one is when Giroud got in as he had to, because
I'm so fucking sick of seeing and hearing about this.
fudge. Anyways, because there was no more subs for Milan, they had to have another player become a goalie, which was Giroud. Good for him. Very lucky and saving goals, closing his eyes. So again, very lucky. And just the last point I want to remark there is on one of his saves, the ricocheted ball that he did went on the arm of Calabria, and that again was not even mentioned, saw, or considered to be again a penalty. Anyways, so besides all this, we are biased. So even though it does seem to me all obvious things, but let's call them, we are fans, so we're going to see them. But that goal was totally BS. And personally, I think that both the refereeing and the VAR need to be revamped. And, I disagree 100% on their call.
It's inexcusable, I think. And for anyone who's listening to this pod who are not based in the US or maybe did not have the same coverage that we did after the match, I don't even want to say I'm curious to know how it was covered in Italy, because in seeing the papers, I think I know exactly how it was covered. But at least here in the United States, we had our broadcaster through a company now called Paramount Plus, which is owned by CBS, which is a big old broadcasting company. Obviously, they're sponsors of Inter and I think a couple other teams throughout Europe. But it was overwhelmingly negative with what the referees had done at the end of the match. I think there was a mix of confuddlement and bemusement, but they brought on referee experts and things, and they were like, there's no way you can say that was not a clear and obvious handball. Like it is impossible. There is nothing that has to do, and I think a lot of what was presupposed on the broadcast, which may or may not be true, and at this point, like, we can only do so much to say ifs, that's, or buts, and I'm already just getting more angry reliving this and rethinking about it again. But could it have been that the people trained to actually do their jobs were interpreting that their responsibility was to understand if he deliberately handed it or not, which is not the fucking rule. The rule is if you hand it at any type of way in that situation, no goal. And so,
especially for the fact that it did change trajectory of the ball. So that's where the rule comes in.
Obviously, yes, exactly. Had he not put, and we've all done this before. Anyone who's had to kick about before, you're trying to juggle the ball, you lose your touch a little bit. And by the way, it was an amazing move that he did to try to corral that cross that came in. But he put his arm out so that the ball doesn't go away and go across his shoulder. That's why he did that. If he keeps his arm level with where his shoulder is, that thing spills out. It's not something that he can then bring back down in front and then turn and shoot. So I think honestly it's a credit, and you would presume, and I'm sure people did see some of the US, like especially the US national team social media accounts, thought this was like the greatest move that ever happened at an all time of any of the sports. And it's just like so embarrassing because it's such a quintessential like US men's national team reaction. But I thought it was really interesting, and I was happy to see that on a network that you think might cater to that type of an audience, they were very much like, this was so plain and obviously missed. I know there were other conversations. There was some very bizarre play. Martinez gets a second yellow and they stop the play instead of letting him play advantage. And at that point, he left his goal, so it should have been a goal, and then it seals the match. And like, there's all this other stuff. For me, like the match had descended into chaos. And your point is totally right. What you were saying earlier is exactly really what this is about. Well, actually, it's not really what this is about, because this is about something else that's a little bit nefarious that we maybe won't spend a whole lot of airtime on. But the referee did not control this match from the very fucking beginning of the match. It was not something that, oopsies, there was a couple of mistakes that happened at the 90th minute or thereabouts. There were several points where he could have controlled the match. He could have issued yellows when you see these fouls. He could have stepped in and said, we're not going to allow this. They could have actually taken some of the plays a little bit more seriously and maybe re-looked at them. None of those things happened. And what happens over the course of the match, anyone that thinks that this isn't really a real thing, in my opinion, is naive. Players understand what they can try to do and how they can have an impact on the game. And when those when fouls are not legislated and are not governed in a way that they should be, then you have some craziness that happens at the end of the match. And unfortunately, with this whole VAR thing, it just made a mockery of it, because every single person watching that telecast had enough of an information, even without having a perfect angle and picture. You had enough information to see clearly what had happened. And that call was not made. And then you've got Magnan gets sent off. Martinez gets sent off. We've got Giroud coming in goal. It was awful. And I think like the last thing I'll say about this match, because it drives me nuts, up until that point, I was watching and thinking to myself, we're looking at something that I don't remember ever seeing before in European football. The way that Gilardino is setting up the team. And this would have been the conversation had we ended in a draw, which is why it's so frustrating to me. Because the way that he approached this match, the way that we had our players set up, I, for one, thought I was going to watch a bloodbath. I thought we would give it all, we would try hard, but we'd probably lose by at least 2 goals, maybe by 3. Milan are super strong. It doesn't matter if they're coming off a European match earlier in the week. We're down at least a couple of players, and in and of itself, it's a difficult matchup. So I thought that's what we were going to see. We had such a great game plan. This was a match where we had a lot of attacking opportunities. We had a lot of chances, more than we normally would have had. And I think the way that Gilardino is designing how our players are interacting with each other is something that I think is very, very unique. The fact that we have Vasquez bombing forward and getting involved in the attacking play, when you have, I guess in this match, maybe it would have been more a player like Malinowski or Goodmanson, but they're having to come back in very, very deep in unusual places, perhaps, to play a role in moving the ball forward instead of kind of being statically in one position and kind of moving along the pitch that way. They're sort of creating these mismatches in different pockets depending on where the opposition is lined up. And so all of a sudden we have these things. And of course, once you have those mismatches, it's really important that you're taking advantage of them, because the flip side of that, especially defensively, is then you could easily get caught off guard because we're not in a certain shape. But I think he's been really, really creative with how he's had that flexible shape throughout the season. And I think this would have been, there were already some, we were sharing this on social media, and forgive me if I forget the publisher, there were some folks talking already. There's an article that I'd shared with you about how Genoa is back. They're back in Serie A. Gilardino is really coming with fresh ideas. They're thinking about something else. This was probably a day or two before the match. And then this thing happens and everyone goes crazy for stupid fucking Giroud, and all the Pulisic fanboys go absolutely wild and think he's easily, the best American soccer player of all time. It just was miserable. And I think the real takeaway here isn't that AC Milan are good. The takeaway is that we're witnessing a different style of play in football with Gilardino. And the moment that the world wakes up to this, personally, I'm kind of scared because I don't know if we're going to keep him for very long. But I think and I knock on wood that I'm saying that right now, but I think the thing that's really fun as a fan is you're seeing this style evolve, and you're seeing different kind of ideas and ways of considering how we're putting together. And, considering we had Haps as our left back, we had Sabelli as our right back, we had Frendrup, I guess left midfielder, really, like wing back, if you want to call him that, Frendrup and Torsby. That's our midfield against Milan, and I thought they did well. They carried out the game plan. So I don't know. It's rough. It's rough because you lose that positive story in place of kind of what seems like a bunch of ridiculousness and bullshit, and let alone all the crazy media coverage afterwards that just puts even a worse taste in your mouth, because it almost suggests that everyone is kind of rigging it in the same way. But before we even get into that or play too much of that, I think at the end of the day, it's just disappointing because you don't have that other part of the story, which feels like it should be part of the story. What is the takeaway is the fact of an amazing Genoa that we're starting to see more and more and more. So when I hear Genuani talk about, oh, he's too inexperienced, etc., I just want to shove something up. Nothing. but essentially, no, I was pleased. You're right. Let's say that the outcome of this match should not be the result, how it happened. Because if we had lost it with an amazing goal by wonder kid Leao, it would have been quite differently, right? It's the how. But having said that, I still think that the match was amazingly directed by our violinist Gilardino. And that's the positive thing. That means that we can face any team without fear. And to the point where you said that the U.S. broadcast was more or less talking about the disaster of the refereeing, only two things I wanted to say to this is that the referee got confirmed. He was a debutant, and he got confirmed without any type of, repercussion of bad refereeing. So from the Referees Association, he did well. And that's one thing that also adds on top of that. And the second thing is all national television in Italy
was all pro Milan, and not even one, well, not even one no, because you still had the odd person here and there that actually did speak the truth. But you could see that it was more geared towards the fans of Milan, based on the fact that there are
more of them.
Literally more of them. So for audience purposes, that's more important rather than the truth.
Yeah.
So to your point, absolutely kudos to Gilardino. I think that the points that we did not get, I'm giving them to him, not the non-points, but the points that we deserve, because he did manage it amazingly. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. Let's forget about, as you said a couple pods ago to me, stay calm, don't worry about it right now, etc. Let's enjoy it. Let's live it. It's a great Genoa. We obviously have a lot of points that are missing to our table right now for different reasons, mostly in the last minute. I am certain 100% one way or another, whether that is focusing more on the concentration, whether is that dipping into the January market to get wherever it's needed and so on. Something is being focused with respect to changing that and in addressing that issue. And again, to what you said, only because it was obvious that Gudmundsson was probably the best player, but at par. And I'll give the MVP of the match to Vasquez because of the tremendous job that he has done.
He did great. He was fantastic. There were people that were ragging on him mainly because of like the Mexico-America rivalry and stuff on social media, which was just like, okay, we obviously just didn't watch the match then, because Vasquez was our best player.
He was the fact of being flexible from left back, center back, and now even propository on the midfield forward side, even not only crossing but getting into the box. Amazing. All right, I could go on forever, because I mean, we're lucky that it's 10 days after the match, because if we had recorded like a few days after or the day after and so on, it would have been a rant. It's already a rant as it is, but it would have been way worse. So I don't know. It depends on what also the listeners prefer to hear, if they want the real rant from the fresh, or if it's okay, a little bit more calmer, more rational one. Anyways, it was a great match. Looking forward to the next one. And having said that, we do have coming up some special guests coming up very soon. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
My name is Fabrizio Cardone, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to La Lantana Podcast, and this is part 2, and we're finally now back after the week. The break of the international. We just saw some matches, awful ones, depending on what side you're rooting for. But we're here with not one, but actually 2 special guests. This is an honor for us to have both Dan and Nick from our Atalanta side, and I'll let them introduce themselves and talk about where they are and what they do. Welcome to our pod, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you, Fabrizio and Matt. I don't know. The honor is, I think, more ours, as you invited us onto your show. We'll see if it's an honor for you guys to have us after we record. Isn't that right, Nick?
Or after Sunday, whatever the result is. But no, it definitely is an honor. It's nice connecting with all different fan bases, all across wherever it might be, U.S., the globe, but especially different clubs besides some of the larger ones that tend to dominate the Serie A landscape sometimes. So this is really a special treat, I think, in that regard.
Well, I guess I have to say one thing. The special treat comes from, especially starting from you guys, because personally, I always say that all the time. Matt can sustain that all the time. I'm not that I'm hating the big ones, but I'm so happy to see also not the big ones up top in the Europa League, whether that is Champions League or whatnot, because enough already about those ones, right?
Well said.
100%. We're not going to argue with that. We're not going to argue with that.
All right, so let's go a little bit into the nitty gritty of things. So Dan, talk us a little bit more about yourself, where you are, if you want to share that, of course, and if you have any platform, and this Atalanta pod that we'll talk about it after that.
Absolutely. So my name is Dan Pezzotta, and I run the Atalanta_Vegas. You can find me on Twitter. Are we calling it X yet, or are we still calling it Twitter? I don't
always
even
call
know.
it Twitter.
Okay, we'll always call it Twitter. Okay. So you can obviously.
It's never going to be Max either. It's always HBO.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. It's just how old are we? We're older than that. That's what we know. But I have been a lifelong Atalanta fan. My last name is Pezzotta, and if you go to Italy and they see that last name, you're pretty sure that you're from Bergamo, and my father is from Bergamo.
Alta or Bassa?
Bassa. Yeah,
Okay.
Bergamo province, more closer to Albino. So technically, my home club should be Albino Leffe, but nobody cares about that. We care about Atalanta in my family. So I mean, everybody has a choice in football club, really, but the only right choice for me was Atalanta from day one. I have been there with the ups and downs. I remember being a kid in Serie C. The last few years of the Gasperini reign has been a great time. Also, here in North America, here in the United States, the coverage for Serie A has been great. Over the last, we'll call it 8 years, starting with BN Sports, we finally get to watch Atalanta every week. I
those days?
I can't forget the time where BN Sports finally got an app that worked on your TV, and Atalanta would be on like BN Sports Ocho, and there would be only crowd noise, no commentary, and it was the best thing ever to see, Papu Gomez and Andrea Petagna playing on a Sunday morning. But I digress. Atalanta's, it's been crazy. So lifelong fan, love to do the Atalanta pod, which we'll talk a little bit more about later with my partner, Nick.
Well, first of all, before I pass it on to Nick, I have to say you're welcome for giving you Gasperini. I'm sure you're more than happy about that one. From our past days, from our previous owner that just had the ups and downs. How many times did we have him? 3, I think.
3 times, yeah.
And then at the third one, he got rid of it, say, okay, you know what, Atalanta, here you go. And you're like, okay, are you sure about it? Because it doesn't seem right.
Yeah, poor Gasp goes from crazy Genoa owner to crazy Palermo owner to 5 games at Inter until he finally found the right home. So
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, we're happy to have him. Thank you for that.
And Nick.
Yeah, my fandom is a little more, it's different, we'll say, than Dan's, definitely. I don't have ties to Bergamo. I don't have ties to Northern Italy, even in fact, but it's a really roundabout way where I got attached to the club. And it's 2023, so it starts about 4 years ago. Job wasn't good. I was like just like sludging around, not really doing anything. And then 2019 Copa America starts, and that got me it was something to get excited about. My wife's from Colombia, so naturally my allegiance falls whether of course I support Italy when they're playing in Euros and whatnot, support the US when they're in the World Cup, but the Colombia is my favorite international team, thanks to my wife. And of course Duvan Zapata's on this club, Luis Muriel's on this on this club. And I'm like, you know what? I'm having such a great time following this Copa America. Let's have that transcend over to Serie A and obviously follow Atalanta, where Zapata had joined Atalanta the season before, put on a blistering display, and then Muriel ended up joining that same year. And from there, it's been it's hooked me ever since then. I started the blog, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months later, just to attach myself a little more to the club, give me a hobby to do. And it's just been, it's been one of my biggest things I've been doing since then. And yeah, as Dan mentioned, we have a new family member now. We have a 6-week-old baby. So it's been difficult. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a little difficult writing ever since then.
Yeah.
Fatherhood comes with a lot of challenges, and getting in front of the computer to type a couple times a week has been a lot more difficult than I anticipated. But
I guess that's when speech to text helps a lot too, right?
Yeah, exactly. When I go out my morning walk with the dog, I should just whip out my phone and just start rambling like James Joyce or something like that. But maybe one day I'll try something like that. But yeah, so AtalantaPOD is the blog I've been running, and will continue to do so in the near future again. And
so what's the name of the platform again?
So the website's AtalantaPassione.com. The Twitter name is the same. Where you can follow me there as well.
That's fantastic. We as Fabry mentioned earlier, we encounter this a lot when you meet fans from other clubs, especially from like not the big six. You don't always find in most cases, and in fact, it's true in our case too. And it's kind of why we're doing Lanterna. Like, it's hard to find English content anywhere.
Yeah.
So to actually have like dedicated blog for Atalanta is amazing. I love that.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. And serendipitous for me that there wasn't really like a blog out there. There's obviously some content on Twitter, but to go in and actually like create a website, do analysis, etc. It was a nice opening into trying to to feed that niche that needed to be supported, however small it might be. At least there are enough followers out there that make it worthwhile.
I guess the natural question at this point comes: how did you guys meet, and how did the Atalanta pod come to happen?
Yeah, if you are interested in Atalanta content in English, the OG is our buddy Nige, and you can find him on Twitter at AtalantaBC News. And he is based in Southern England, and he's been an Atalanta fan for years and years and years. And he was the main follow on Twitter for a long time before there were any other English-speaking accounts that had lots of follows. I hopped on board probably around 2016, 2017, around when Gasperini started. I had never gone onto Twitter before, and I was like, maybe I can find some like-minded people. And I found Nige, and we started conversing. And a little while later, he said, "Hey, fancy doing a podcast?" I was like, "Sure, everybody's doing a podcast. Why can't we do a podcast?"
Exactly.
And so we did that for a couple of seasons, and then we kind of he was getting really busy with his content, and we came across Nick and his blog. And like Nick said, there wasn't a ton out there in English, and Nick's was so good. And he was in the United States, and one of the hard things was me being on Pacific time in the US. Nige 8 hours connecting was quite difficult, and having that type of consistency for our listeners. God bless our listeners; they still listen to us even if we were really inconsistent. But like we always say, we don't get paid for this, so you get what you get, folks.
you know the feeling.
Exactly. So yeah, having Nick came on to our podcast. I remember the first time, Nick, I think you were in the car.
Yep.
The first time.
I remember it.
That's how that worked. But it became a thing where Nige moved on and kept doing other great content for Atalanta, and Nick came on board, and we have a little bit more North American accent and American accent to Atalanta these past couple of seasons. And Nick and I have met once. We're not just internet friends anymore. Nick came out to Las Vegas to visit me. Oh, what a shame to come to Vegas, right, Nick? But yeah, so we have met in real life. But that's the history of the Atalanta pod. And again, it's really there are a lot of people who are looking for English language content, whether they're fans of Atalanta or they're just interested in teams outside of the Big Six. It's so much fun to see the kind of where the listens come from, from all over the world. It's been really rewarding to do it, and found a great friend in Nick as well. So
absolutely, and I'm sure that Matt and I can say the same thing, other than the fact that we're still missing the meeting each other still, but that'll happen hopefully soon.
You don't have an excuse, man. You're in Toronto, I'm in New York. This is like an easy weekend trip. We got to make this happen.
It is only 8-hour drive or 1 hour and a half plane sort of thing, maybe, or something like that. Anyways,
make it happen.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear your story also similarly, differently, maybe perhaps 2 hours, for the fact of, out of the, as you said, the big five, or I call them the five sisters and so on, where that content is readily available, and you can, any pod per se, or any, as we call it in Italian, testata, which is like your newspapers and so on, will always and only talk pages and pages of the five. And then you get always like, okay, a little small article, or even that small topic about that whatever team, because it's playing against the big ones. So I'm sure that the excitement and the interest more so around teams like ours, and especially you guys having that excitement around the opportunity of traveling around Europe, which makes it even easier and more open for others to think and talk and say, oh, look, that's Atalanta. Oh, Atalanta, that's not Atlanta, is it? No, of course not. et cetera. Right? Oh, it's like, it's a black and blue like Inter. Oh, but it's a different team, It's all good and interesting things.
It's been some run, man. I guess Dan and Nick, this has got to be something that's kind of surreal for you guys too, because obviously for a more casual Serie A fan, Atalanta's been all of a sudden in the forefront, kind of as this sort of Cinderella darling, not quite obviously, but probably above where you guys would expect. How would you summarize the last 4 years plus? The teams have been fantastic, so it's kind of hard to say you wouldn't exactly expect it, and you can't even call them really a surprise outfit anymore. But what's it been like watching them these past several seasons?
Oh, Nick, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first, because I don't really know anything else, right? Because when I started following the club, it was year one of Champions League. I still remember coming home watching the Dynamo Zagreb game on replay where they got smashed 4-0. I'm like, what am I even doing? Why am I going to watch the second half when I know they're already down? I digress from that point, but coming into this club, I that's really all I've known. So the year they finished 8th, which was last season, then where there was no European football, was the weird season in that regard, where there was nothing really in midweek to follow in that regard. But at the same time, usually when I'm choosing whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, most of my other sports allegiances in the United States are not on big money teams that will go out and just buy superfluously. Yeah. So I understand it from that standpoint, where it's more meaningful seeing a team overachieve and being able to have sustained success in a more unconventional way, rather than going out and just shelling out money to buy superstars or to buy wins, buy points, whatever it might be from that regard. So I think that just carried over for me from how I kind of view sports in general. And I think Atalanta is almost like the perfect team in that regard, where they're successful. They do it in a different way that's unconventional what you see across from European football. And I think that can attract a lot of people to the team if they're looking for a new Serie A team to follow in that regard, if they don't want somebody that's just going to go out and be a big spender per se.
Yeah, it's a totally different mindset.
I totally agree too. It's like the first team and actually the second one after, but Juventus we're not going to even compare it to because it's just nasty altogether. But the fact of having that next generation, so that team that is planning to have that roster that is continuously in Serie C. So it's like a youth platform to grow and so on. And it's something actually our new owners are thinking, actually not only saying that the model is going to be sort of similar to the journey that Atalanta made, but also with this the next gen type of approach as well. How do you see with respects to Atalanta compared to perhaps more how it used to be, and where will it and should it go from here onwards?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Fabry, because I think as a long-suffering Atalanta fan, in the beginning, in that 2016-2017 season where we came out of nowhere, we were like a hipster club, right? You had even though us Serie A lovers knew about Gasperini, we knew about what he did with Genoa in the 2009-2010 season, how he took them to the Europa League, the way that he played, but all of a sudden in the collective consciousness of football fans, all of a sudden here's Atalanta, right? And really, I mean, in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, we had a run to Europe, but nobody really knows about this club from Bergamo. Bergamo has 120,000 inhabitants, right?
Right.
But we know that the steps that have been taken by the ownership, by creating Zingonia and that youth system, like people who knew Serie A knew about Atalanta for a long time, but it was just that next step in finding essentially at this point the right coach, the right business plan to finally do something with all that money that we make from selling these players. But then you get to a point, in my mind, Atalanta's progress, and you talked about this under 23 thing in Serie C. I'll get to that, but it's like the third phase of this new Atalanta, because we had the early phases with Gasperini and getting them into European competition, as Nick mentioned, in that season where we finished in 8th, and now we have getting back to the Europa League, and what we had the biggest spending transfer summer that we've ever had. So now I think this is like the third relaunching, and all the different tactical shifts that, we know Gasperini is going to do something with a 3-4-3. He's never going to change that. But how does the team play within that system, and how do we go forward? This Serie C thing, though, I think is it's kind of akin to me as an Atalanta fan. Do I want to be successful and potentially be opened up to this big money stuff? All these things that we say that we don't like about teams who are bigger than us. I don't know the answer to that. Would I rather be as a fan of mid-table club with a team that runs itself well and maybe make a run in the Coppa Italia every once in a while, make it into the Europa League? I don't know the answer to that, but I know that I am torn because I've supported the club for so long, and the last thing I want is for the Atalanta culture to go away because of money. Maybe that's a little idealistic, I don't know, but I'm just telling you how I feel. I think Nick would feel the same if the Baltimore Orioles decided that they were going to just become the New York Yankees, right? So
we can spend a little more than we are now, but yeah,
exactly.
Point well taken.
But I think the youth thing has always been a big deal for us, right? And on half of me says this Serie C under 23 thing is no good. It's no good for Italian football, right? But on the other hand, with all these new UEFA regulations for loans, and at one point, Nick, didn't we have like 80 players out on loan?
It was insane.
It was insane.
60 plus at least.
60 plus. Yeah, it was like us and Chelsea.
I think even Genoa was high on that list too, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely true. Yeah,
Peak Preziosi strategy right there.
Yeah, exactly. And what are we going to do with all these great young players? Like, what are we going to do if we can't loan them out to Serie B, Serie C, Serie D clubs, right? So I'm a little torn on Atalanta's success over the past few years, and I'm a little bit torn on this under 23 team, which it's not going well so far. That's for sure. I mean, as far as results, but we'll see in the future. It's definitely an investment in the future. We've seen that it has definitely helped a little bit Juventus and them bringing people through. But hey, we've got Ruggeri and Scalvini playing day in and day out right now. So something good has come finally out of our youth system.
No, I do agree. I kind of have to side with you with the half side that you're saying it's not a good idea. It's not a good thing. While the other side, from an investment perspective for the team itself, is an amazing factor. When you look at it from an Italian calcio perspective, it might hurt a lot. Sure. Maybe not from a player's perspective, but you're starting to see, well, we're adding more next gens, for example. That means lesser and lesser teams are able to stay afloat because of, I don't know, higher power money. You know, calcio is changing and we kind of have to protect it, but at the same time, we have to also adapt. Yeah. I don't think we have to close our eyes and say, no, we can't do things anymore because we have to keep how it was 100 years ago. Oh, by the way, today we're recording on, oh, you already know, today being Tuesday, October the 17th, happy birthday to La Dea. So it's 116 years.
Wow.
Coming from the oldest team in Italy to you guys, happy birthday then.
We're still looking good. Still looking good. You're always going to be older than us.
Well, it comes with the territory. No, jokes on the side. No, what I was trying to say with that is, like, it has pros and cons, the fact of the next gen. Hopefully we come to a point before it's too late of destroying the lower leagues and so on to create maybe a separate league altogether. I think that would be probably the solution to it, but I don't think we're close to having anything like that happening. Let me go back quickly to a question again about our dearly beloved Gasperini. Loving from a lot of Genoa fans. A lot of, I call them vedove, which are like the widows of the ones that always want him back. He is one of the most well-respected. We know his temper is not the best. He's one of the most well-respected for this inventive champagne style of calcio that he has brought in. We even enjoyed it, even at the Champions League level, all the way up. But what, in theory, and I'm quoting here, so it's not my words, but in theory, he's also the coach of great soccer, but not winning anything.
Nicholas, you take this or I'll go for an hour.
Yeah, winning anything's tough because if Gasperini's been here, 8 years? Is that it? We'll say 8 years. You have 2 competitions per year that you can realistically win, excluding things in Europe. So that's 16 competitions that you could potentially win. And that's pretty small. There's a little luck involved in having that come through. So while he hasn't won anything, I'm all for, is the process good? Is the ride that gets you there worth it? Because at the end of the day, as a fan, you have that one moment in glory to bask in the win of a Coppa Italia, or one day maybe it's a Scudetto, who knows? But you have months in and months out of enjoying really good calcio that he puts on the field every day, and being able to live that day in and day out rather than one shining moment that comes from a championship. At least for me, that's all the better. I'd rather just have that continued competitiveness. And if that means never lifting a trophy, I'll live with it. But obviously lifting a trophy would be great at the same time too. And I would not shy away from that if it happened.
Yeah, I wouldn't shy away from it either. I mean, maybe if we were founded before 1900, we would have won a bunch in a row. No, but it's a great question, right? Like what are we here for? Are we here to just, make it to European competitions, play nice football, or are we here to win trophies? I actually don't know the answer to that. How many teams actually win anything, right? So I think that it would be, for his legacy, it's not good to not add to the single trophy that we have in our senior team coffers, which is the 1963 Coppa Italia. Right. So I think that it loses a little bit of something once Gasperini moves on. Everybody will remember, the team that almost made it to the semifinals of the Champions League, with the exception of 5 minutes against Paris Saint-Germain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So little by little, that goes away. And you know, the rest of us will become widows for the time that we had Gasperini. It's honestly, Nick knows that I'm so guilty of that with players, Papu Gomez, you know, Josip Ilicic. Like, I just won't shut up because I miss them. We miss the good old days. But it would be really nice. I would love a Coppa Italia. We've been in 2 finals. I think we got robbed against Lazio, but I digress. And we lost to Juventus pretty fairly and squarely, I think. But, you know, I think it doesn't matter to us who are Atalantini for the most part, who are really enjoying this ride. But I think it matters to Gasperini and his legacy. I think it matters more to Gasperini than it does to Atalanta as a whole.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what you and Nick were both saying about what it's like being a fan now, because it's kind of like, obviously you want to get to that peak part of it, right? Of having that amazing thing that's there. But there's also kind of like, we can relate to this maybe in a different way because we're not at that same level right now. But when you come into this season with a certain expectation and you see that met, you know, that's kind of what the exciting thing is about being a fan. Like we're not in a place right now at all, of course, in our situation where we're expecting to see a trophy, but I think that probably plays a role a little bit in the fact that like you are enjoying, you want to see that success, but at the same time, you know, you understand the circumstances of everything else that's out there.
I mean, it's great that you asked that question though, because I mean, Nick, we're going to win the Europa League this year, right? Like, I think it's all right. I've already booked my tickets to Dublin, so like we have to win the Europa League.
We have to win now.
No, but Nick laid it out very well. I liked how he said the fact of, yeah, sure, it would be great to raise that trophy, but if I have to put it in lieu of the fact of always having fantastic football, great matches, and all your opposites always being afraid of you is always also something very exciting when you start the match as well. So it's always like, you know, you look up to Atalanta right now and say, I don't know if we can make it, that's the good part of it. And if I look at actually this year's season, it seems a little bit more balanced compared to the previous year anyways, or previous years. So we don't really know how it might go. Maybe the 2 Milanese, maybe not, and so on. And if I look at the run of form, except the last match, which was a bizarre one, I honestly would not put money for Lazio to win. No offense to Lazio fans, anyone's listening to, but I would have never put them to win. But what do you think? What happened there? I mean, okay, at Rome and so on, but what happened? 2-0. Then you managed to come up to tie, and then a few minutes right before the end, they cut your legs.
Nick, we were hungover, weren't we? After that victory at Lisbon in the Europa League. Honestly, we suck.
That was awesome.
After midweek games. We are absolutely atrocious after European games onto the weekend. We fell asleep at the back. I mean, defensively, we've been strangely...
Does that happen also the match before? Because that's something that we're interested about.
Not as much. Nick, do you remember? I don't think we are. I think it's always the match after, unless it's like one of those, like it's against like Crotone or something like that. It's always like one of those matches.
Yeah, one of those. And unfortunately, the international break, there was a wrench into that probably too.
Yeah.
But Dan hit the nail on the head. But Lazio scored twice in the first 11 minutes, and it was the hangover. And it was a midweek game, it was a Thursday game, so there was even one less day. Then the Champions League teams had to re-prepare. So we're already running thin this year. We have it feels like a deliberately thin roster, and some injuries to some players that didn't help that either, especially at the back with Toloi out. And it rolled over at the end. We just ran out of gas and let Vecino sneak by and get that last goal. It just felt like it was coming for Lazio a little too much, unfortunately, that last goal.
Yeah, and I think that the change to have Koop Miners on the bench until the second half. Nick and I talk about this quite a bit. Where we're really thin is in midfield, because it was always Freuler and De Roon in the beginning, and then it was De Roon and Koop Miners, and then we brought Ederson in, and now Gasperini needs to play all three of them, and so having Koop Miners on the bench for a rest, and now he's injured. He didn't even play for the Netherlands. I think there was some fatigue there. It just shows how we're not as deep as we would like to be in key positions, and central midfield is certainly one of them. But hey, we came back. I thought we showed a lot of fire, but it was never in doubt for me that we would not win that game, even after we tied it up. It just never felt. I think I've watched way too many Atalanta games to be fooled into thinking we were going to come away with 3 points in that game against Rome. So,
but that's not to say that you have an amazing Pasalic. I know he's also doing quite well, also internationally, and Scamacca, which he's another one that we know quite well from a few years back.
Mhm.
So, what do you think about your squad this year compared to the days of Papu and Illich and so on?
Yeah, I will say this is now that Zapata was here for the first couple of games. He's on loan at Torino and probably won't be in black and blue again, even though that loan was just an option, I think. This feels like this iteration, this version of the team is finally like the phoenix and the ashes of the old team of Papu, Ilicic, Zapata, where they ran the show. They're finally in the past, and this new team can go and take form. Dan mentioned earlier, this is the most expensive transfer market we've had on record, and bring in a guy like Scamacca, who's also our record wage bill for one player we've ever had. Bring in El Torre, who unfortunately is out until January with an injury. Record transfer fee. They intentionally went out and spent the money to go and build a new team that could maybe not rival those three up front, because I don't think anyone will ever do that, but like a new offensive flavor for Atalanta. And then you bring in Charles de Ketelare, and like the Percasses legitimately mean business when you bring those three guys in.
And they didn't get rid of Koopmeiners. They didn't sell Koopmeiners,
Yeah,
which I think
exactly.
is probably one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're still figuring it out. I'm not surprised we're still figuring it out. It's October. They've had less than 10 games together, and Scamacca he's picking up some niggling little injuries and hasn't really been in full form yet to lead the line like we would have hoped he would. And of course, Torre hasn't played at all. So we're still waiting for this team to shape into form. And might not happen in 2023 where we truly see what we have on the pitch, but I think there's been some encouraging signs, at least early on, that we can see what this team potentially could be if everything clicks and falls into place.
I don't think any of us Atalantini are deluded into thinking we're going to see the same thing that we saw early on in Gasp's reign, where we scored 98 goals in a season, and it didn't matter how many goals we conceded because we just outscored the opponents. What you're seeing now is like very balanced. It's one of the reasons why Gasperini feels like he has to play three central midfielders instead of just two. Free transfer with Seo Kolasinac has probably been one of our best transfers coming from Marseille, former Arsenal man and Schalke man. Like all of a sudden, such a calming, in the back line. Berchem City's been good in the middle. And of course, Scalvini had a bit of a howler for Liazzurri today, but like having him in the back line has been amazing. So we haven't even really missed Rafa Toloi. We're seeing much more balance. I'm not going to lie, it's not nearly as exciting right now, but it could be, right, Nick, with De Ketelare, Scamacca, and you want to call it Lookman or Toure as a front three. It could be pretty crazy. Who knows? But all I know is we're not conceding as many goals, and looks like Juan Muso's back up for the job that we brought him in for. So it's been a good defensively. It's been a great start to the season.
So I'm going to tie back to something that you said a little bit earlier with respect to the fact that you think and feel that your midfield is the weakest aspect. So what other aspects would you say that are things that you fear in this match when it comes to your formation or your tactics or so on? Nick mentioned about the international break is definitely not something, I think that's for a lot of teams, but definitely it's something that you're worrying about. Midfield, is there anything else that kind of worries, or maybe, still the in tune waiting for 2024, maybe it'll that what we call in Italian the rodaggio, where the players play together more and more and more, and then they fine tune it a lot better to the point of not perfection, but you know what I mean, like when they start to know better each other.
Well, I think with against Genoa, it'll be really kind of interesting because I honestly don't really know what to expect with Genoa. I think there's been some great matches, some poor results. What I fear, the midfield is not necessarily that it's our weakest point. It's probably our shallowest
the depth
point.
of it. Yeah, Ederson and De Bruyne are a rock solid duo if they don't have to play 90 minutes every single week. Yeah,
exactly. Martin De Bruyne will never get old on social media, but he's starting to get older on the pitch, so he can't be playing every single game. And he also played for the Netherlands too in this international break. So I think that for me, the biggest thing is I think we'll probably play Mario Pasalic. I think Koopmeiners is probably not going to play. So he'll probably be like the trequartista, unless Gasperini decides to use a more attacking trident. So of Lookman, De Ketelare, and Scamacca, and just see if, De Bruyne and Ederson can handle the midfield. against Genoa. Honestly, the biggest thing that I'm worried about is always the X. It's always the X's, and that would be is what happens if Ruslan Malinovsky plays and he gets a free kick. I don't know if I could handle that, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah.
If he scored against us, because you know me, I love my old players and I still miss Ruslan all the time. So I don't know. The midfield, I think, will be an interesting battle to see if Genoa can overrun Ederson and De Roon. We would have to play Mario Pasalic as a trequartista in a 3-4-1-2. I think it might behoove Gasperini and Atalanta to play the attacking trident of Lookman, Scamacca, and Charles de Ketelaere against Genoa. I think that might be a good thing, which he has done against sides that struggle a little bit more. So we'll see if that's the case or not. But God, if Ruslan scores against us, Nick, I quit.
Especially if he celebrates too. But
he will not celebrate. He will not celebrate.
Yeah, I think Dan hit the nail on the head pretty well. And I think Atalanta is also pretty vulnerable with teams that can press them high up. As free-flowing as everyone likes to call Atalanta, still they can be had if you're able to pin them back in their own half and make them just hoof the ball up to Scamacca and have him isolated by a defender and like a central defensive midfielder or something like that. And we've seen good teams do it. We've seen teams at the bottom of the table also successfully do that against Atalanta over not just this season but last season as well. So that's always a strategy to keep other teams in games, especially ones where Atalanta is more likely favored.
The biggest difference is can Genoa, and most of the time teams at the top of the table, if they do that, they can do that for 90 minutes and we can't recover. Can Genoa press us like crazy for 90 minutes, I guess is the question. If you can do that, and if you can get us from if you can break our press and you can get in transition, you can beat Atalanta. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be an interesting one. I mean, I know Fabry's like harped on this one a lot. And you guys have probably seen a little bit, like Gilardino's strategy, definitely we're very heavily reliant on pressing to at least in certain spells. I don't think we necessarily do like some crazy, Jurgen Klopp style stuff, but we definitely have kind of almost patterns of play where we apply like a press or a double team or something else. And it seems like over the course of the match, and you guys saw it against Milan, you've seen it in some of our other results, usually ends up biting us at the end of the match. And I think this one will be another interesting one because we're out several players ourselves. So I think we'll probably look pretty similar to how we played against Milan if I had to put money down, obviously without Martinez in goal. But I think it's otherwise probably the same lineup.
Just last news here, Matt. We're going to recuperate a whole bunch of players except Martinez because he's obviously out of the red card, and Messias. But everybody else seems to be.
Strootman's going to be back. What about El Strootman? That's surprising. Okay, I'll take that. I mean, that's better than.
Will they hang in for the whole entire 90 minutes? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it bodes well for us. I think like we almost have the opposite problem that you guys. We have, it seems like 11 central midfield players and not a whole lot of everything else. But it's also kind of, I don't know, it seems like Gilardino is trying to play a little bit more of a, not exactly positionless, but we have different players kind of coming into different moments, either attacking or defending. So how we approach this one, I think, will be a little bit interesting too. I would expect Gilardino is going to kind of keep his style, but we just might need to adjust. And I do think Malinowski will start in this match, just knowing we're also down with Retegui for another one. So we've got that kind of interesting angle to the match as well.
Retegui might be back.
Do you think he'll be back already too?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be even better.
Gilardino, ex-former player of Gasperini, but also we've seen a lot of former Gasperini players that are in half of Serie A is basically populated by former Gasperini, or perhaps because they also touched on our team. But yeah, we have Juric, Palladino, and Thiago Motta, and now also Gilardino because he did play a little bit with Gasperini. I still do remember dearly this interview at the beginning of the season, or actually it was at the end of last season in Serie B, where they had an interview in Sky Italia, but where there was Gasperini and there was Gilardino, and Gasperini was so emotional, happy to see not only Gilardino being a coach, but also of bringing Genoa back to Serie A. And he says, that's like the most emotional thing that I have ever had. And I'm so happy that you are the one that are guiding this team up. So do you think it'll be also an emotional aspect that might, impact him, and or with, not that he has never played against Genoa in the past, but now he also has it against Gilardino. Do you think there could be some sort of emotion on the both sides, actually, not necessarily only on one side?
Gasp has a good record against his students, which is
Damn it.
I'm sure it would be, but Thiago Motta and Gilardino aren't like the Juric and Palladino, who play a very similar style and setup. So definitely different formations, different ideas. I don't know, maybe it's just a formation thing, but it's always, he does do good against his students. He definitely has Palladino's number at Monza. Juric has given us some hard times over the years, but we've usually taken care of business. This one I'm not so sure though. I think Gilardino, like you said, there's so many central midfielders for Genoa that if you pack the midfield, you can create some havoc for Atalanta. So emotion always. I think Gasperini always has emotion. You said that he's not like the sweetest man and he has a temper. Yeah, he's not our cuddly Zio that we want to have a hug with. Outside of the pitch, and you see some of the affection that his former players have for him. So I think it's going to be a good game. I think it will be emotional. I think that of course there's probably equal amounts of pressure. Genoa wanting to make sure that they do everything they can to keep climbing the table, get some stay in Serie A first and foremost, and of course for Gasp, he's got to make sure that the people above him he's not losing track of them, because we're already like 4 points behind Fiorentina. We're only a point behind Napoli, but the rest of the crew is getting away from us. So I think for both clubs, this is going to be a very, very important match coming off of the international break. And I think the biggest thing, Nick, that we can say is ordinarily we would say, oh, we're at home. In the past couple of seasons, we've been atrocious at home. Very, very strange. Since COVID, we've been quite atrocious at home, but we're finally seeming to get some results at home once again. And we only have 3/4 of the stadium right now. The Curva Sud is still demolished and getting built. So
I thought that was already completed. No, not yet.
The Curva Nord was they did the Tribunas first, and then the Curva Nord. Now they're doing the Curva Sud. We ain't got all that money to do it all at once. We gotta pay by installment.
No, but it's good that you actually started this topic. I wanted to get into more nitty-gritty with respects to the predictions.
Oh.
So give me a little bit more. I mean, you did say most of it, but give me a little bit more into detail, and then we'll go to Nick right after about predictions and, strategy formation or fears against Genoa, or what you are comfortable against Genoa, or ins and outs also of your team, what you expect from the match itself, and so on. Let's start with you, Dan.
I think it's going to be a little ugly. I don't think it's going to be the champagne football at all. I think the teams are going to cancel themselves out. I think it's probably going to take about 15 to 20 minutes for any semblance of anything to happen. Gasperini puts out a 3-4-1-2 usual lineup, but this time Pasalic playing trequartista, who's going to be dropping back because there's just too many midfielders for Genoa. And then probably, I would say Lookman and De Ketelaere. Scamacca will actually not start, I don't think. If he does, and I would prefer him not to start. I'd rather have Lookman and De Ketelaere if we're playing with a front two and not a front three. I think that Genoa will have probably not that many opportunities, but when they get them, they will be right in front of Juan Musso. So it's going to be important for Juan Musso to come up big probably once or twice in this match. I believe Atalanta will probably come out with more possession, but they are going to find it hard. There's going to be a lot of dinging the ball around the back. Low scoring game, maybe 1-0, 2-1. Probably most bettors would say that this is Atalanta's to lose, so I'll say 2-1 Atalanta.
Yeah, Dan echoed a lot of the sentiments I have, and I know the manager's different, but I still remember the ugliness of the last time Atalanta faced Genoa twice, and I think both of those games were 0-0, right? Mm-hmm. And that game right before the Christmas break in Genoa, the stadium was or the pitch, it seemed like it was all patchy, just a really rough and tumble game, and I think it's going to be a little more of the same. Just who can persevere and get through 90 minutes of a grudge match, which is not always the most graceful game to watch, but they can be fun in their own rights. And Dan is right. I don't think Scamacca starts. As weird as that is right now, he can get a start for Italy against all the other strikers, but he doesn't even get a start on his own club team. Sometimes
that's how bad Italy is, yo.
Touche. Touche. But I think the game probably hinges on passage a little. And I think one criticism you'll get from all Atalantini this year is that it's not just this year. I think it happened a lot last year with now number 8, used to be number 88. He just gets so lost sometimes. Like he can become the weakest link in the team where when you don't want that weak link in your team, where you can get away with having just a bunch of good players as long as there's no weakness on the team. Sometimes he just doesn't offer anything offensively nor defensively. And he's always good for getting in the box. He has an amazing nose for goal sometimes, and he's a good finisher, but he really needs to help the team in the build-up if it comes to it. And if Genoa's going to be packing that midfield and he's not really going to contribute, whether it be his notorious heavy touches or just being a hair late to 50-50 balls and stuff like that. It can put a lot more work on Ederson and De Roon to pick up the slack in the midfield. But the secret weapon we do have this year, I think we have to mention Matteo Ruggeri. Dan mentioned him at the beginning as one of our academy graduates, but he's played the second most minutes this year for Atalanta behind Martin De Roon, and he just answers the bell every week. Every week we see the starting lineup come out, and we're shocked to see him starting over Mitchell Bakker, or even if they wanted to move Zappacosta over to the left or something like that. And week in, week out, he gets better every week. He just feels like he's getting more comfortable in the system, and Gasperini has said that he can just run forever. So stamina is not really an issue with them. So we don't really have to worry about him ever tiring out. And he probably has the best cross from the left side of the field in Serie A. I think I'd put his left foot coming from that side up against pretty much anybody. If you have to kick across into a crowded area to find the head of somebody right now. So he might be the secret weapon that Atalanta needs to unleash if it's getting a little gritty and it's like 0-0 in the 75th minute or something like that towards the end of the game. But I think I'm looking at the scores right now. If you guys, besides at the beginning game against Fiorentina, you've given up 2 goals as a max ever since then. So there's no way Atalanta gets 3, I'm thinking. So I think 2-1 is a fair score. I think I'm with Dan on that one as a good place to end up.
I have to mention, Nick, I'm glad you agree with me. But on that left side, so on Genoa's right side is Stefano Sabelli, former Bresciani. So we have a little bit of a Bergamo-Brescia duo there to see.
There we go.
Duel to see. Yeah, so
I forgot to mention, as long as Ruggeri's playing with his broken nose, if he's fully recovered from that, but I think he is. Yeah.
Did you guys see that? You guys see what happened in the under-21s?
No.
That body play.
I heard that someone got kicked out because they punched someone in the nose. But...
Yeah, Marco Nasti. What a great name for a guy who I don't know if he sucker punched him, but he punched Ruggeri in the face during a bit of a row at their little retiro. So I couldn't believe it. Now he's going to be masked like Osimhen. You'll see he's going to score a million goals. Watch out.
I don't know. I'm angry with myself with how optimistic I am for this match, to be honest with you. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I feel weirdly good about it. I still am pretty skeptical, as you guys...
It's the new shirt, Matt.
Sure.
With the new shirt.
It just finally came in the mail. I still don't... I wish the colors... That's my only complaint. I wish the colors were a little bit more like Rosso blue rather than whatever blue this is and some cream color, but whatever, it's fine. But, I do think whether or not we have players back, getting those guys to come straight back against a really strong side in Serie A is probably a big ask, and I would be surprised if we saw a lot of them guys coming back from injury come back and start. But I think we had a reason to obviously be concerned. We've had that, and we've had kind of a challenging start to the season with some of the opponents that we've had, and I think we managed Milan really well for really the bulk of that match until Pulisic gets a hand on the ball and all of a sudden the match goes to hell. But I think before that stuff happens, you've got a fighter's chance throughout the match, and if we're able to apply that same plan more or less, I think we've got a decent shot in this one. It'll be interesting. There have been some chatter. I'm not sure if this is really a major net change maker or difference in the match, but for some Genoani kind of talking about, do we have Vasquez as we've kind of been playing pretty much 4 center backs in our back 4 position? Is it Vasquez, or are we gonna have Vogliacco in there? We've seen De Winter on the right side, which I think probably we'll see again. But there's beyond that, I still think is probably we're gonna line up in a similar way. For us, it'll be a couple of things will be interesting within this match. So of course, mention it really briefly. We won't have Josep Martinez in this one due to the red card at the end of the match in Milan. So in comes Leali, who we had a really kind of shaky start to his campaign for us with the Coppa Italia, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like early on in the season, if I recall correctly, we signed him relatively quickly before that match happened. I might have that slightly wrong, but I think seeing how he plays with the defense will be interesting just because it's different in game time than it is in practice. Some of the places where I think we've looked maybe vulnerable, obviously, to Dan's point earlier, we don't have throughout the entire campaign a whole lot of shots on target. So if we are missing Retegui for the entirety of the match, you wonder a little bit how we're going to get that. I thought we were superb in answering that question against Milan. Can we do it again against Atalanta? I think we'll have to see. At the beginning of the season, we had a really hard time actually getting the ball out from the midfield. I think we've kind of better solved that with the way our teams have been organized, and honestly with how we've either had our forwards kind of coming back into play and receiving balls deeper, or last match against Milan, Vasquez was basically our number 10, which was hysterical and amazing at the same time. So I think I would expect to see a little bit more of that, but to Dan and Nick's point earlier, can Gasperini maybe spot this kind of trickiness that Gilardino's kind of incorporating in the squad and maybe nullify some of that? Because we definitely had a lot fewer answers with how to kind of really put together a more potent counterattack at the beginning of the season, I would say, than we have had in the last few matches. I think it could end up 1-0 to Genoa. I'm with you guys that I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of goals in the match. I think there could be a relatively decent amount of chances, but I think it's going to be more of those, maybe 3 or 4 good chances total, but not one team with 18 shots on goal or anything like that. But we'll see. I think this one could absolutely go either way. Atalanta are a very formidable opponent, but I'm just curious to see how Gilardino applies his style again in this match, because I think so far he's only has to be confident with how he's approached it. It's just, can we get another result here? It's an interestingly, I guess we're a little bit fortunate right now in the table. Most of the teams that are around us in points have a similarly difficult match in this match week, but that also gives you kind of a type of an advantage. If we are able to get something out of this, maybe we can get a little bit closer to safety. And I think as Genoano, we have to be very excited about what we've been able to get from the matches that we have. But you look at the table, we're only 8 matches into it, but we need much more in order to have that kind of safety mark. So that's one I'm sure the team will be taking seriously.
I think Matt caught most of the gist of what my thoughts were around the team as well. Definitely one thing that is preoccupying me the most is having the sub in our goalie side. Yeah. While Martinez, even though he's been conceding a little bit more goals compared to what we were used to last year. Mind you, that was Serie B, but nevertheless, some injustices has happened throughout the season, and not to mention the 4-1, which is sort of like a null for us anyways, the first match against Fiorentina. Yeah. But having said that, he's the one that is preoccupying me the most, and that's why I'm going to go a little bit against what you guys have said with respect to the amount of goals. I think it's going to be a lot of goals.
Oh yeah.
I think similarly, because I think we're going to see something similar to what we were used to. We, as in we Genoani, were used to with Gasperini, a match with a lot of goals, and whoever's going to score the most is going to the one is going to make it through. And not having Martinez in the goal is the key aspect, in my opinion, because even though he's not necessarily the best goalie in Serie A yet, he has potential, but he's definitely not there. Leali is preoccupied me, but having said that, he was Leali, so our second goalie, was considered one of the best goalies for last year in Serie B. So that does not mean because he screwed one match in Coppa Italia that he's gonna have a bad match against Atalanta.
The only thing I would add to this whole thing with Leali is Fabry and I talked about this a little bit during the season too. They're with Gilardino's style, and maybe you guys have seen some of this. There's definitely this idea of playing through the back and having the keeper play through the back. Martinez is better with his feet, but honestly, I wouldn't say he's any sort of Pirlo or anything. He's nearly given away 3 separate goals, and we've been lucky that someone on our side has just gotten a foot to it. Leali did that in the Coppa Italia, and I think one thing that is going to be interesting to watch with this is I don't think it's a secret or a surprise that Leali is more of a traditional goalkeeper. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but it's definitely a different type of player. It's an experienced player, to Fabry's point, but he's a different type of player. And so that'll be another kind of angle to this. I would be honestly, as a Genoa fan, much more concerned if we are trying to have Leali be Martinez, because that's not who he is. And we've already seen some of those mistakes happen. And against a side like Atalanta, you can't have any mistakes really. So that will be kind of an interesting thing to see. Usually in the beginning of the match, you'll see this because we'll already start kind of having some of those possessions coming out of the back. So if he starts huffing the ball forward, I think at least I personally will be breathing a little bit easier during the match. If we're playing these tight passes and like right in front of the goal, it could be a long one. But yeah,
we'll have to see, because essentially it's one of the two. They either are going to adapt to the traditional style of goalie, or Leali has caught up with what Gilardino's expecting from him. And that's why
in a couple of months.
And that's why I'm thinking between the two, we didn't necessarily going to try to adapt to one goalie, and definitely the goalie can't necessarily catch up to the style that Gilardino's expecting from him. Having said that, we did have a confirmation, again, except the Fiorentina match, that it is a very good and solid defense that almost altogether is worse than the best goalie out there. With respects to the midfield, if indeed we do have both Strootman and Bedell coming back in, it's a godsend in a way, even though it did show against Milan that we did not necessarily miss them entirely, because both with the benchers that came up did show us that they were well worth it. Obviously you didn't have that Bedell's brain type of approach, but with Thorsby like mid front and who else was that there at the center? French more in the midfield backwards, it kind of compensated for one player. But at the same time, we might have a reborn Malinowski, which I'm hoping for, based on the fact that he did quite well also with the national show up. And I think it's going to be very important for him to show to his former team that he is still there, and that he needs to be dearly missed. Having said that, how do I see and who do I see edging this match? I want to believe, and this is just my brain and heart put together at this time, I don't think it's going to be easy. Everybody has said that, but I'm going to probably go against everyone. I see an actual tie, and it'll be like a 3-3.
Take it.
Obviously, it can go anyway. We are playing at Bergamo, so obviously it's not going to be easy. But there's two major factors. One, if Gilardino studies the match very well to how he has proven, at least with the bigger teams, that's one major component. And the second thing is if we have Goodmanson in his day, that we have already seen and commented in a few pods anyways, that if he is in a bad day, we lose usually. If he's in a good day, there's high possibilities of winning.
I feel like there's like more than 10 X factors in this match. There's all these different things that could happen. It's going to be, for sure, it'll be really, really interesting. I'm super curious to see also Gasperini's approach to the match too. Like maybe with what's available to him, he needs to think differently about it. So I think it'll be a good one.
So the match is on Sunday, October 22nd, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or whatever that one is, or 6 p.m. local time. And it's going to be a good one. Obviously, may the best win. And I think that it'll be an interesting one. And that's the most important part. I just can't wait. I've been a little bit tired about this, the national break.
It always goes on too long.
Super pumped for
frequent. There's like 3 this 2023. There's way too many of them, but you have to have them, I guess. Yeah.
I would be less mad if Italy didn't ruin everything every time.
They're very close of ruining it again, but very close.
No.
Well, at least Kamaka scored his first goal today for the Azzurri and on Atalanta's birthday. So.
And then everything else.
And then boop, everything goes down from there.
Went back to whatever it was. So guys, first of all, thank you once again for being guests in our pod. I guess we're at a wrap, but I wanted to also not only thank you, both great to have you, and supportive also of not the big Five Sisters. So you will always be welcome on our pod. But if always, but if anybody wanted to reach out to you guys individually or with the pod itself, why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, Twitter is the best place to find us. Our pod has the handle at AtalantaPOD. Pretty simple. And for me, it's at Atalanta_Vegas. Shoot me a follow, shoot me a message. And Nick?
Yes, sir. So yeah, Atalanta Passion on Twitter, and the blog, AtalantaPassione.com. Yeah, you can find the link from the Twitter page there, and Twitter's usually the easiest way to find me at the same time too.
Just so your listeners know, Nick is the brains behind the operation. I'm simply the color commentary and the goofball. So
that's not true. No.
Well, I mean, if it wasn't for Nick, we'd just be playing stupid games all the time, and I'd be crying about missing Josip Ilicic. But we do like to have a lot of fun, and thank you guys for inviting us. It is so great to always meet up. Nick and I don't get to join together a lot. I'm so happy that this worked out because it's we're the yin and yang of the Atalanta pod here. You can't have a very balanced view without the other. I'm usually quite emotional. Nick is more level-headed when it comes to it. I guess that's what happens when you're half Italian, right?
That's right.
I mean, Nick, you're Italian too, but
a quarter Italian, so I'm half as emotional.
Half, exactly, perfect. But yeah, absolutely. You guys are welcome as well. Hopefully, we can have you guys on the next time Genoa. We visit Genoa in the next round, and we'll definitely see. I am hoping for 3-3. I would love to see some goals. I don't care if we lose a couple of points. Who cares? It's early on in the season. I just want to see some goals, for goodness sakes. I'm tired of defense. Let's go back to that run and gun. What do you say, Nick?
As long as we can get a couple 7-goal games this season, I'm all for it. Yeah.
It's not really run and gun. It's more like who makes mistakes. That's all it is.
Yeah.
If we do see a keeper mistake early, I feel like it could definitely be like that because we're going to have to go up. So you never know.
Wamuso could definitely be that keeper mistake.
We don't even bother.
Talk about distribution.
Don't talk to me about Juan Musso's distribution. Don't talk to me about Juan Musso's distribution.
Yeah.
All right. That was a blast. Thank you very much, guys. Also for us, you can reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Obviously, we're a little bit more, busy on Instagram, but obviously you can find us on all three. Drop us a like, comment, follow us, and whatnot. And obviously on any podcast of your preference, most platforms readily available out there. So thank you again, gentlemen. And never forget, always and forever, Forza Genoa.
You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genoani Si Resta. Thank you for listening and see you next week.